Niño De Elche is a Spanish Flamenco Nuevo singer-songwriter. Antología del cante flamenco heterodoxo. You wouldn't believe I actually used to do Spanish at college. You wouldn't think it, would you? This is his latest release. He has been at it a while, but this album has managed to gain traction through websites like Radio Music, and it turns out that it's starting to get a little bit of bubbling sort of growth, like little bits at a time. It's getting that acclaim through word of mouth, that kind of thing. It's actually really cool to start seeing this kind of thing happen. I mean, you've seen it earlier in the year with Rosalia at a really big level. You know, she's starting to gain a huge traction through the West. Her videos always hit the millions. Artists like Elza Suarez as well in the bossa nova field are just starting to kind of make their way to the West, and we're sort of finding out more and more about these different genres of music from other countries, and they're starting to break their way through. It's really cool that this is happening. And at a smaller level, you've got an artist like Niño De Elche, who unfortunately hasn't really broke through in a particularly big way, but I feel as though if more people found out about this artist, they would fall in love with his music, because it's certainly a frigging journey, this album. I should point out, if you don't know what this is or haven't heard of it before, it is in fact a double album which stretches out to 1 hour and 46 minutes in length. Now, generally, I have minor issues with length in albums. The biggest issue usually is where am I going to find the time to sit through albums like this on a regular basis when I can find an album that I love just as equally as much that's 40 minutes, you know what I mean? You just gotta be realistic, and sometimes really long albums just can't find their way in your daily life, you know, and it can be a bit tricky sort of falling in love with albums this long. But in fact, I must say, Niño De Elche has really got me falling in love this time. This guy has such an avant-garde approach to this genre of music. Like, there are so many tracks that completely break the mold of what you're expecting to go into. The first few tracks on the first half have this really like ambient, sorrowful sound to them that you just can't really get a hold of, and you're not entirely sure where it's going to go from there. But then as soon as you get to like track 3 or 4, it does start breaking into Flamenco Nuevo type stuff. Also important to point out as well that as a singer, he has quite the range. You'll probably be surprised to hear when he breaks into these more opera type singing moments, and he can belt out a friggin' note as well. It's almost like this dark wave classical sound being mixed in with these Flamenco Nuevo tracks as well, and it just makes for a really interesting journey, because each track just doesn't sound like the last one, and there are like 27 songs here, and yet there isn't one track that feels like familiar when you're going through this album. And that is incredible to go for 1 hour and 46 minutes, and each track has its own individual character and personality to it. That's rare to find. I'm not exactly like this great connoisseur of this style of music, but I feel like you don't really have to be. I mean, so many tracks just go through these weird turns, these avant-garde strange alleys that you're just not looking out for at all. Even multiple listens later, there are still moments that I'm just in awe of with his vocals. He just does these really guttural growls at times. Take track 6 on the first half of this album. Yeah, I'm not going to name names because I'm going to completely botch them, but this is like a straight up horror type track. Like the way it kind of eerily like stomps in with the and his vocals just over this beat as well. It's just so friggin' weird to listen to. It hits this whelping crescendo at one point, and then it kind of just fizzles out and goes back into the and then track directly after this is this piano based one, as if like the previous track never happened and we're moving on to something else completely different. And he pulls it off as well. Like, he can go from one extreme to another just like effortlessly, and you wouldn't even notice, and it never makes any parts of the album flow worse or feel like, you know, it's inconsistent. It just all feels like really compact. It can be really hard to describe what he's going for on some tracks with his out of this world vocal performances, and the instrumentals, as I said, are very diverse and varied throughout the whole thing, and you do feel a bit out the loop not knowing exactly what he is saying, because obviously there is a language barrier there. But I wouldn't really say that you're sucked out of what's going on throughout the entire album either. You know, it's one of those releases like even like Elsa Suarez or Rosalia, sorry. You don't exactly need to know what they're saying to enjoy the music. I would in fact say that the second half is filled with the most accessible tracks, or the most, I guess you want to say, traditional Flamenco Nuevo tracks. The Caña, Pasodoble and Rumba y Bomba tracks are certainly some of the biggest highlights for me. Especially Rumba y Bomba, that is a full-on fiesta, man. This is the most fun track on the album. It completely catches you off guard because it's just so out of nowhere, but it is just such a fun listen. And I love that this album can go completely off the rails with the sounds and ideas and his bizarreness, and then he can draw you right back in with these incredibly catchy, fun Spanish tracks. Perhaps it is the variety of sounds that makes me enjoy this more than your average friggin' 90+ minute album, because there is just so much going on at different times that you don't ever feel like it's boring, you know what I mean? Like if it was the same style of song throughout the whole of this album, it would absolutely be a chore. But his musicianship is absolutely magnificent. He's got to be one of the most underrated artists of the year, because who have you ever heard that sounds like this and makes music like this? And honestly, there is just so much to this album, it gives me anxiety thinking about how I could possibly run down each track and describe them to you, because it would just take forever. So I think I will try and leave it here. I feel like for music critics and nerds, this is the kind of album that will appeal to anyone in this field. I really think this could be an album people will grow to love over the years, but we'll have to see. But yeah, overall this is friggin' great. I mean, apart from a few moments that I'm not entirely invested in, maybe sometimes there are just instrumentals that don't grip me in the same way, or you know, some parts that, because I don't understand the language, I'm just not entirely sure what he's going for. I feel like they are moments that I don't enjoy as much. It's another one of those releases that I'm probably gonna have to like try and translate at some point, just so I can get, you know, an understanding of what's being said. Track 5 being a good example on the first half, where he's doing this Bjork-ish Madonna type vocal experimentation, where I'm just not really sure what it is that he's going for, but I'm sure it makes more sense if you know the language. And then the final track to finish off this entire album, where there's this like voiceover coming from a train station. Again, these kind of things, I'm just not really entirely sure what it is that's being said. That's pretty much it for complaints. I mean, I have very little to complain about with this release. So yeah, I think over time I will end up loving it even more and more and more. But for now, I think an 8.5 out of 10 is the best score I think I can give it. It could easily be a 9 one day, once I've sort of delved into the lyrics and the themes. But until then, make sure you give this a listen. It came out like back in February. I've only recently got into it because it is so long, so I was putting it off for months and months and months, but I do not regret giving this one a shot, because it is pretty fantastic. Give it a listen, please, and if you already have, let me know what you think. Subscribe if you haven't already. Have a good day. Hope you get a good recommendation out of this. Goodbye.